Sentry mode activated.
I don't have any bullets. You gonna give me bullets? Are there bullets up there?
Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Actually, we're going to be doing the exact opposite of that today. We're diving back into Remnant, covering melee weapons, something I typically don't play, but it's definitely an option. So melee builds require a lot more bossing knowledge since you're up in their face and you have to kind of avoid everything, and they don't really do anything to make up for the added difficulty, except Unarmed. Unarmed is pretty fucking crazy right now. When you pair the Ring of the Unclean One and the 5-finger ring, you can just pump out some nasty levels of damage, reaching punches and kicks up to about 6 to 10k depending on your target. Unarmed also attacks faster than other melee weapons, except maybe claws. It's definitely stronger though. That being said, Unarmed is not long for this world. It's been talked about a bit on the Remnant Discord and will likely be getting nerfed too, kind of like flops were. However, these punches are crazy strong, dude. They could cut the damage in half and it would still be crazy. So it may not be the strongest melee build in the future, but for now it's definitely overpowered, and it's still probably going to be usable. So the swording equipment here is pretty obvious outside the rings. We're running Corrosion and knives for Bleed and Corrosion because it's just too good to pass up right now, and unfortunately that's just how it is. And we're going to be running Polished Whetstone for the crit and crit damage stacking along with the 5-fingered ring, because pairing those things up is just nasty amounts of crit. I'm going to be using the Scrapper armor here because 30% all damage is really good. It's got no real strings attached since it's all within 5 meters, or melee, so yeah. And it does work on mods too, but that's not going to be really important here since we're not damaging with mods. But it also provides some close range damage reduction too, which is always nice. Ranged weapons are totally up to you. I like my shotguns, but you may want something to clear areas and tag ads and boss fights. So the next build here I had talked about before the DLC, but I decided to modify it a bit. This is Osseous Dots. So as I mentioned before in the previous vid, dots delivered from melee weapons like Smolder, Claws, and with Razor Stone all count as melee damage. So Osseous armor can stay active on enemies with dots. But also Terror Margin, which heals on melee hits, will leech off your melee dots too, which is fucking awesome. And if we're at full, we get 20% more melee damage. So yeah, what's not to love? We get damage and defense in the form of leech. So I'm going to be using Smolder here as a way to apply fire dots, so I don't have to use a weak mod that I'm not scaling. Then Razor Stone so I can apply fire and bleed. Corrosion Aura because of course, especially for melee. And Frost Spear to slow enemies down and get the crit damage bonus from frozen enemies. Since we will actively be using 4 statuses, I went with the Punisher's Ring, which will get us 20% all damage on enemies since we have 4 statuses on. You can feasibly run a 5th status with Overload if you use Voice of the Tempest and a Fire Dot mod and Abrasive Charm, but I don't really think that's worthwhile. And while you can use Frozen Spear twice and put on Frostbite and Freeze, I don't know if that actually stacks. Though anyway, the Overload booms could be pretty tasty, so you can feel free to try that route too if you want. You're just going to kind of lose your leech from Terror Margin. We can also change this up a little bit by using the Hero Sword and using it as a pseudo-ranged playstyle. And I went with Ring of the Gambler since I'm not really hitting weak spots with this right now, but you can use other things as well. While the setup is more of a hybrid style, it can be fun, but it's kind of outclassed like everywhere. I don't really see this saying shining anywhere that, better melee or a better gun build could do, so it's just fun. Next up is a build focused on Bleed, though Leech is getting nerfed as well because right now the Triage trait, which doubles all healing received, well, that works with Leech, and so you're basically getting double your Leech. That's going away, so I'm not using Bloodletter's Insignia here since I really don't know how Leech will be, but at least for now, with just using Bleed off Claws and the Leech from Warlord, you can keep yourself alive pretty easily. So Serpent's Ring is going to be my placeholder here. If the Leech isn't sustainable later on with the Triage nerf, I will probably put on Bloodletters, and then it should probably do just fine. I mentioned that I don't like Warlord armor in previous videos, and that still holds true, but the damage here is a lot better than just running Leto's Bleed tank, and with the Bleed nerf, I'm not really sure Leto's will be the best tank. Plus with Warlord, more damage means more Leech. Now I opted for Razor Wire Necklace here, not only for the bigger bleed, but because 15% damage from Razor Wire applies as a multiplier, not added to base value like other trinkets, at least according to Hunted on the Ward 18 Discord, so I believe him. So that's a really solid bonus. Overall, I don't think going pure melee here is all that important because you can easily just use shotguns and other weapons and you're getting Warlord's 40% damage buff, so I'm pretty sure everything is going to work out. But if you want to be pure melee, this will hold up pretty well with all the extra leech. Alright, so the last build here is focusing on Voice of the Tempest overload, like specifically that overload. Now previously I did a hybrid setup for all shock damage, but this one is just pure melee. So oddly enough, Voice of the Tempest actually scales with mod damage, not the pokes, but the actual overload detonation from it. Probably a bug, not sure why it would, but it does, so that's why I'm going with the lab armor here. Your ranged weapons again don't matter since we're going to be doing melee only, so usual suspects with cold and corrosion, whatever you want, go for it. For the neck, it's interchangeable, but I went for the Storm Amulet because it helps with the melee pokes, and since overload scales off mod, you kind of get the double dip here a little bit. Rings are just crit and crit stacking, nothing all that important here. Although here on Unclean One, maybe I should have swapped out of Gambler since, you know, he's got a big weak spot, but I just wanted the overload, so whatevs. The explosions tend to hit pretty hard and you can chain them a lot, like they're doing 2 to 2.5k, pretty sweet. Now while this isn't as strong as Unarmed by any means, the spears also have great poke ranges and are much better for ad clear. Now you can also change this up a little bit by running Vulcan's Detonator. So overload counts as an explosion, so you can actually get the boost from that to apply, and you can put dots on as well. Blink token also counts as an explosion, so I'm going to be using that for more funsies than anything else, but it does hit hard. Blink token hits for like 3k plus. Now this setup is using Twisted Armor, which should be getting a buff later on to be more usable. I hope so, because then the setup will just perform better later on. But Lab Armor is still the better choice here since we're going to be running Blink token, and we're still scaling overload off for mod damage. I went for a Hive Cannon as my Corrosion applicator. Since I'm using Vulcan's Detonator, it will scale the initial shot and the mod shot as well, plus it'll also apply dots, so just, you know, doing that. So if you want to give this one a try, by all means go for it. So yeah, here's some just interesting melee builds. Hopefully whoever wanted to play this game like a Soulsborne with melee combat can give it a try. Melee isn't the most fleshed out and balanced of combat here, but it's still a lot of fun, and the damage is very sufficient. So yeah, that's all for me. Good luck out there, hunters.